There's something about fragrance that can take you back in a second to your mom getting ready for work or when she would get ready for dinner, her smell that would linger in the hallway and on her clothes in her room, your grandmother's vanity, her bathroom, when you hugged her and that smell of soft roses, powder, perfection, when my dad would get ready for work. Back then, fragrance, it didn't just smell good, especially when you smelled it on someone that was really important in your life. It felt like something. It was rich, deeper, and very personal. And somewhere along the way, that experience has started to change. Welcome to Sorry It's Discontinued. I'm Hilary, and this is a podcast about the reality of retail, the people who keep it going, and the brands and products we've all loved along the way. Today, I want to talk about fragrance, where it really began to shape the world as we know it, and how it evolved into what we know now, and what we might be walking into next. So hit follow, have a seat, and let's get into it. Sorry. It's discontinued. Let's go back for a minute. Fragrance, it's been around for centuries. We all know that. Burning resins, oils, crushed flowers, sometimes just to mask the reality of everyday life. In ancient Egypt, fragrance was sacred, used in rituals and burial, in connection to the divine. In ancient Rome, it became indulgent, bathhouses, oils, excess, fragrance as a luxury. But for a long time, it wasn't personal in the way we think of it now. It was something used for atmosphere, for ceremony, for covering up stinky smells with pretty smells. And then something shifted. Late in the 1800s and the early 1900s, this is where fragrance starts to become intimate. It becomes more identity, becomes more fashion, something you wear, not just something around you. And this is where houses like Guerlain come in. Founded in 1828 in Paris by Pierre-François Pascal Guerlain. This was a family of perfumers, crafting scent almost like tailoring a gown. Guerlain wasn't creating for the masses at first. He was creating for royalty, custom fragrances for emperors, empresses, people who had wanted something no one else could have. And one of the fragrances that really put Guerlain on the map was the Eau de Cologne Imperial. It was made for Empress Eugenie, the wife of Napoleon III. And it wasn't just the scent. It was the story. Fresh citrus, neroli, herbs, light, elegant. The bottle was adorned with 69 bees, a symbol of the French Empire. And suddenly, fragrance became more than something you smelled. It became branding, and Guerlain continued building on that, creating fragrances that weren't just pretty. They were emotional, layered, complex, and recognizable. They worked with real materials, rose from grass, jasmine picked at specific hours, sandalwood, amber, iris. These ingredients weren't easy to get. It could take thousands of flowers just to create a small amount of oil. So everything was concentrated, intentional, very costly, and very precious. And when you wore a fragrance like that, you weren't just wearing something that smelled good. You were wearing craftsmanship. You were wearing art. You were wearing something rare. And then Coty enters the picture in 1904. This is where you really start to see more shifting because Francois Coty didn't come from tradition in the same way. He came in with vision. He believed fragrance shouldn't just be for royalty. It should be for more people, but without losing beauty, without losing artistry. And what he did next changed everything. He started blending natural ingredients with newly created synthetic molecules, which at the time, in the early 1900s, that was bold. Because up until then, fragrance was rooted in nature. Synthetics, that allowed something different. It allowed more consistency and affordability and creativity that went beyond what nature could offer. Notes that actually didn't even exist in the real world. Textures that felt more modern, and it was pretty futuristic at the time. And he didn't stop there. He understood presentation. So collaborating with glass designer René Lally, creating bottles that were just as beautiful as the fragrance inside. And suddenly, fragrance became accessible, really opened the door to modern perfumery. And fragrance began its transformation into what we know today. More accessible, more creative, more expressive, and it set the stage for something even bigger. Because just a few years later, a fragrance would be created that didn't follow the rules. It rewrote them. That's where Chanel enters the story. This is where we move into what feels like the golden era of fragrance, early to mid 1900s. And the story just deepens because when Chanel enters, changes everything. In 1921, Gabrielle Chanel, Coco Chanel, wasn't trying to create a typical perfume. She did not want something that smelled like a single flower. She wanted a woman's fragrance, something abstract, modern, that hadn't existed yet. So she worked with perfumer Ernest Beau, and he presented her with a series of samples, numbered bottles, and the story goes she chose the fifth one, the one labeled number 5. Now, Coco was known to be very superstitious. If you're into fashion and fragrance, you already know all this stuff. But 5 was her favorite number. So she launched it on May 5th, 1921, the 5th day of the 5th month. And that alone tells you something about fragrance at the time. It wasn't rushed. It was intentional and very sacred in a way. And what was inside that bottle changed everything. Yes, it had florals, jasmine, rose, but what made it different was the use of aldehydes. Aldehydes weren't something you could just pick from nature. They were created, refined through chemistry. Some existed naturally in trace amounts, but what perfumers like Ernest Beau did was amplify them, shape them, stabilize them into something usable in fragrance. Aldehydes don't smell like a single note. They don't smell like a rose or a flower or wood. They create texture. They lift the fragrance. That sparkling, almost airy, clean quality that feels light on skin. Almost like the scent is glowing instead of being heavy. And Chanel number 5 used them in a way that had never really been done before. Not as a background, but part of the identity of the fragrance. So instead of smelling like one thing, it smelled abstract. And it was one of the first fragrances that didn't try to recreate nature. It created something beyond it. And that's why Chanel number 5 didn't just become popular. it became iconic and it changed everything. That was the case for a lot of fragrances at the time. Guerlain, Coty, Chanel, they weren't launching variations. They were building identities. When a fragrance was created, it was meant to stand on its own, to be recognized, to be remembered, to be signature. Now, technically, different concentrations did exist back then. Parfum, extrait, sometimes cologne, but they weren't marketed the way that they are today. They weren't separate launches. They were simply different strengths of the same soul, the same recipe. Even what was called cologne back then was not what we think of today. It actually wasn't weak. It really wasn't watered down in the way we experience now. And formulas were often richer. They were less restricted, of course, and more saturated with the raw materials. And the parfum, oh, rich, dense, oil-based, long-lasting, worn close to the skin, deeply present. That's why one drop, you see those little bottles, dab, dab, dab. A drop could last all day, sometimes longer. The ingredients, they just weren't regulated, and production was not rushed. It unfolded slowly, part of your skin, part of your clothing, and your presence. Now, even the bottles back then reflected that part of just high-end luxury and intention. If you look up the Fragrance Vault, a store in California, where this amazing woman has been able to collect numerous vintage bottles, she will show some of the oldest bottles that are even in existence in the world. And they are gorgeous. And you can even look up Erin Parsons and her vintage perfume videos of her speaking about Marilyn Monroe's fragrance or Josephine Baker. It's pretty incredible. But you look at these bottles, the heavy glass, intentional designs, something you kept on your vanity. It was an object of beauty, not something you cycled through. A lot of times people had just a few, something you lived with. That fragrance, it had memory built into it. And that's the part that still kind of lingers for me when I think about my mom or I think about my grandmother, my great grandmother, and those bottles that I would see on their vanity. It wasn't just the smell of it, but seeing the bottle and the memory connected to it and how it would stay on their skin or their clothes or linger in the room after they left. Those bottles, pretty incredible. Now, when you walk into a store today, things are so different. Not in a bad way, they've just shifted. It's not just fragrance anymore. It's volume. It's eau de parfum, eau de toilette, elixir, intense, low, parfum. One fragrance now has 5, 6 versions, and it can feel exciting. More options, more ways to experience something you love. But when you really step back, you start to see what's changed because fragrance today is moving so fast. Fast launches. It almost seems like every day. Wait, have you heard about what trend cycles, market demand? It drives what comes next. Money, money, money. It's not just about creating something timeless anymore. It's about staying relevant, and regulation plays a role in that too. So we have to talk about the many natural ingredients that are restricted or limited, especially ones that could cause sensitivity or allergic reactions. So formulas, of course, have shifted. There is a lot more synthetics out there, more controlled compositions, more consistency across production. and cutting costs. But the interesting thing is, synthetic, it actually doesn't mean worse. In many ways, which this kind of blows my mind because you think natural, organic, a nice natural leaf, a pure rose. But synthetic, in many ways, it's better. Safer for the skin, more sustainable for the environment, which is so important, more stable, more predictable, and it allows perfumers to create things that weren't even possible before. But at the same time, things are more controlled. It can feel a little less emotional because everything is created so fast. Fragrance feels to me like a consistency of launching and more about mass volume and fast fashion in some ways. But that's where the question starts to come in. Is that bad? Was it actually better back then? Does it just feel that way? The truth is, it's probably somewhere in the middle. Fragrance in the past, yes, it was more concentrated, less restricted, but today we do have access to more than ever before. We have more variety, more innovation, more ways to experience scent, and cleaner formulations, more ethical sourcing, advanced chemistry that allows for precision and safety. So maybe it's not that fragrance has lost something. Maybe it's just evolved, like we are all evolving. It's more accessible, yeah, more commercial, but more available to everyone. And it's actually really fascinating because we're already starting to see this evolution with AI helping create fragrance formulas, analyzing patterns, preferences, even emotion, lab grown natural ingredients, recreating things like sandalwood or rose without over harvesting the earth, even personalized fragrance, scents created based on your skin, your chemistry, your preferences. And it feels like fragrance is starting to split into two directions. You have the fast fragrance, trend-driven, constant launches designed to keep up with the moment. And on the other, a quiet return to craftsmanship. Smaller houses, more intentional scents, story-driven fragrance again. Slower, more thoughtful, more connected. There is something very familiar about that. Not just how fragrance smells, but how it makes us feel and how it stays with us and becomes a part of our story. From then to now, yes, fragrance, it has changed. But look at what we have access to today. There are so many places to explore scent now. You can walk into your local department store, your Dillard's, your Macy's, Nordstrom's, even in smaller towns, and still have a moment at the counter. You can stand in front of a fragrance wall at Sephora or Ulta and discover something you didn't even know you were looking for. But what's amazing is you can visit small boutiques where the experience feels slow and intentional, where someone takes the time to tell you the story behind the scent. And suddenly it becomes more than just a bottle. It's amazing. Like when I went over to visit Krigler, or when you go to Dallas and you visit the scent room where fragrance, it's like art. And you're not rushed, you are guided. But crazier, you can take classes now. You can learn fragrance over the internet, understand notes, train your nose. There are programs like Institute for Art and Olfaction where you can actually study the craft, something that would have felt so out of reach years ago. You can even go with friends and create your own scent. Here in Houston, there is a place called Tijon, Houston. where you can go and make your own fragrance, your own memory in a bottle. When you think about it and all of these options we have, we're spoiled, but in the best way. Because what once felt exclusive, what once belonged to a moment in time, is now something we can experience every day, and we can decide how we want to do it in our own way. And maybe that's why fragrance still matters so much. It's not just about luxury anymore. It is about connection, memory, feeling. And I really believe for so many of us, fragrance has become a form of therapy. From someone discovering scent for the first time to someone who may have once owned an original bottle of Chanel No. 5, there is a place for all of it now, for all of us to really feel something when you can feel lost. So maybe fragrance, it hasn't lost its magic. It's just evolved, and we get to choose what it means for us. And it's not just about how you smell, but how you're remembered. I thank you so much for sitting with me on another episode of Sorry, It's Discontinued. I'm Hilary, and I wish you the best week ever. I hope you're doing something nice for yourself. You're giving yourself a hug because you are amazing and you deserve it. So please be kind, shop in store, shop with your local associates, and smile whether you're behind the counter or in front of it. See you next time. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to Sorry, It's Discontinued, the podcast that brings you the reality of retail and the people, brands, stores, and products we all love. If you enjoyed today's episode, hit follow, leave a review, or share it with a fellow retail warrior. You can always connect with me or support the show at sorryitsdiscontinued.com or buymeacoffee.com/sorrypodcast. Now, this podcast is independently produced and not sponsored by any brand, company, or organization. All views, opinions, and personal stories shared are their own and do not represent any retailer or brand mentioned. Brand names, product references, and service mentions are included for storytelling and commentary purposes only. But I thank you so much for sitting with me today. And remember, continue to shop in store, support your local stores and your local sales associates. You can even call them and order. It's amazing. And every visit helps keep these stores open so we can all continue enjoying real in-person retail therapy. And I'll see you next time. I appreciate you so much. Bye. Sorry. It's discontinued.